Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Margot Pinault. I work in DG Energy Efficiency Unit. And today I will present you the policy context for today's session that is dedicated to the Live Clean Energy Transition sub-program call 2021, the topics focusing on building policy frameworks at different governance levels. So within this context, I will start by the most important and broadest element, which is the European Green Deal, which is the new European growth strategy and also the strategy for the recovery from pandemic. This is the ultimate aim to achieve climate neutrality in our continent by 2050, based on modern and resource efficient, sustainable, competitive economy. For this, the Union translated this commitment into a law by the climate law. So there is a legal obligation to become climate neutral by 2050. Also, the Union's greenhouse gas emission target for 2030, so the midterm target, has been increased to 55%. And this is also the reason why the Commission is currently working on the revision of most of the energy and climate legislations, including Energy Efficiency Directive, Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, and other legislations that are in the so-called Fit for 55 package. Another element of the policy context which I would like to stress is, of course, the green recovery, where we have unprecedented public funding available from the EU budget of the total 1.8 trillion euro, which is composed of the recovery funds under the common brand Next Generation EU with 750 billion, and also the new MFF 2021-2027, which is beyond 1 trillion euro. And what is important in this context is to highlight that 30% of these resources must be allocated to climate action, which means 550 billion will be indeed earmarked for climate objectives. Within this context of green recovery, the main EU facility that will support the recovery measures in EU member states is the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which will make available to European countries a total of 672 billion euro between grants and loans. And this funding will be allocated based on the recovery and resilience plans that the Commission received in the majority of cases and is now assessing. And what can be already highlighted, that indeed a substantial part of these funds will be allocated to green objectives, climate targets, where the minimum threshold is 37% of the total budget to be allocated to it. And energy efficiency will play an important role. We see already much of focus on buildings renovation, and we hope that indeed the objectives set by the Renovation Wave and other policies on energy efficiency and renewables will be supported by this substantial public funding support. The next information is that you very well know public funding will not be enough to reach our objectives towards climate neutrality and the targets in 2030. And that's why we need to put in place the whole range of support instruments and also the framework conditions to trigger private investments for achieving climate neutrality. In this slide, you can see the EU funding landscape that is presented according to the objectives of funding, while direct investment can, of course, be supported through EU budget by the traditional source of funding like the cohesion policy funds, so ERDF, ESF, and also the new recovery funds like Recovery and Resilience Facility. but also just transition mechanism, just transition funds. Those funds are typically dedicated to co-finance the investments directly. To leverage and mobilize private investments, we need to de-risk these investments, and this is the action that is provided by the European Investment Bank. Under now the common umbrella of Invest EU, all the financial instruments, guarantees, loans will be provided to member states and to private actors in order to mobilize and leverage private financing. And here, of course, we also would like to see a lot of financing dedicated to clean energy. The research and innovation funds will be allocated through the centrally managed Horizon Europe program, which is composed of several clusters, and Cluster 5 is dedicated to climate, energy, and mobility. Within this cluster, there is Destination 4, focusing on end use, decarbonization, and energy efficiency, and specifically buildings and industry. LIFE program that we will be discussing today within this landscape is presented as a program that is building the enabling conditions, regulatory policy enabling conditions at different levels, and also market conditions, so working very much with businesses, with market actors to facilitate the transition. And finally, the technical assistance, this is also provided by the EIB, by the European Investment Bank, and probably very well known to you, ELENA facility that will also continue under InvestEU, but there are other technical support instruments under cohesion policy funds that will continue. So now I would like to move to the specific legislations that are being revised. Energy efficiency directive revision will bring us a novelty that translate into the legal text the principle that we used to use and promote, the energy efficiency first principle, which is the most sensible, I would say, approach to the energy transition and transition to climate neutrality overall, as it ensures that this transition is carried out at the least possible cost to society. So it is at the same time very cost-effective manner to drive the energy transition. So this energy efficiency first has been recognized as a guiding principle by EU energy policies in the European Green Deal and in the previous strategies. But now the Commission is preparing the guidelines that will translate this principle into the legal text, and that we can have some legal basis for applying it, and also practical steps, practical explanation how to apply it. The other elements that are being revised in the directive is, of course, the level of the target, the level and the nature of the overall target, the target that is set by Article 7, or in terms of savings, energy savings obligation in the end use, which can be strengthened. The stronger exemplary role of the public sector, and within it buildings renovation obligation of the public buildings that will be also extended to all the buildings, not only the central government buildings. And finally, increased focus on alleviating energy poverty, which I mentioned already in somehow, because applying energy efficiency is sensible from this perspective, that it is lowering the cost for society, and especially lowering the transition cost to the poorest groups or lowest income groups of society. And this is very important. The next element of the legislative revision is the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. But first, I would like to introduce to you the Renovation Wave, which was already adopted last year, but it brings the policy framework for the revision of the EPBD. The Renovation Wave strategy calls for an action at all governance levels to double renovation rate by 2030 and to deliver 35 million renovation of buildings by that time, which will create jobs, which will contribute to local growth and, of course, to reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and reduction of energy consumption. At the EU level, as I mentioned, this will be translated into the revision of Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. Indeed, a number of provisions are being assessed now, including introduction of minimum energy performance standards, which would create a legal obligation for renovation of buildings, of the existing buildings at some point of time. Of course, it will be introduced progressively, and it's being assessed how and at what point of time this obligation should exist. Other measures being assessed are deep renovation standards, building renovation passports to track gradual step-by-step renovations, and also strengthening of energy performance certificates, make them of better quality, better comparability between different member states, and also more accessible, more understandable, and more used by the market actors. So that would be everything that I wanted to present you on the policy side, and I just wanted to highlight that we are talking about the fourth new sub-program of the LIFE program, Clean Energy Transition, that has a dedicated total budget of almost 1 billion euro for 7 years, and that will be dedicated to supporting implementation of energy efficiency and renewable energy policies in Europe. And today we are specifically focusing on the policy framework supporting actions that will act at all the levels, from the local to the national through regional, and also linking these levels together in order to have a coherent way of implementation of the legislation and coherent moving towards clean energy in Europe. So I would like to thank you for your attention, and I hope that you will have an interesting session today. And I also hope that you will submit very good proposals in the future. Thank you.